Hello and welcome to another episode of the MHR Podcast. I'm Andy.
I'm Alice.
Alice, right then, we're into the year now. We're rolling. Episode 2 of 2024. We've spoken quite a lot just before Christmas about what we thought all our predictions were for like 2024 and reflecting on how the year went at the world of work.
Yep.
And I thought what we could do as we kick off this year, we can do a bit of a mini series called our 2024 predictions, where every week in January we can do a bit of a deep dive into one of our 4 key themes. So HR, payroll, finance, learning, right?
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great.
So I thought we can, the first one we'll do a deep dive, our 2024 predictions episode this year for payroll.
Payroll. Oh, that's going to have a few changes since last year, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems like it's an interesting time, isn't it? We've seen a lot of shift across the last year in terms of expectations of how payroll should work or understanding how it is. And I thought, and I'll share a link in the bio to this episode if you're watching on our website or wherever. Yeah. We'll give you access to that guide. We could look at what the MHR research has said about the challenges that businesses are going to face in 2024 in regards to payroll and how digital transformation can support them get around those challenges.
Interesting. I think in our digital guide, we've got a couple of our product managers that
Yes.
have done a few quotes on their predictions. So it's interesting from our viewpoint, probably having a bit of a discussion about payroll and then seeing what they're saying because they'll have all that market research behind them and their knowledge and expertise.
Yeah, I think one of the great things the company we work for, right, is not only do we build software, we talk about HR, payroll, finance, learning issues, right, but we actually have experts in place that can talk about this stuff and have written about this stuff. So we will be quoting some of them today, which I think is really good. So instead of us just waffling on, we're going to take our experts' opinions and we're going to tell you what the world of work is going to be challenged with and how we can combat those payroll issues in this 2024 prediction special.
Interesting.
Cool.
Wow. Wonder what is predicted for 2024 then.
So, the headline is this, right? Payroll departments are facing a lot of game-changing challenges at the moment, right? Okay. And we're expected to all come to a head in 2024. So, firstly, I think what we need to do is explore what are the risks, what are the challenges that payroll departments or payroll as a function are challenged with, right?
Okay.
The first one is talent and knowledge gaps are a huge risk to organisation when it comes to payroll expertise. And this kind of comes into what we were talking about last week, right?
Yes, it does.
Retention is a problem, but also having the right skills in. So, one of the things that our report highlights is that with the volume of changes that have occurred over the last few years, along with like experienced members of the payroll community maybe retiring and the ever kind of switching kind of world that we're living in, what you've got is an increased decrease on like knowledge in the business about how payroll functions or how legislation works and how you can keep compliant. Okay. So, because usually, payroll can often be quite a slow-moving part of the organisation. Yeah, it's
quite manual normally, isn't it? When you think of payroll.
Yeah, and it's seen as kind of a very experience-driven. Like this is what we've learned across the way, and this is the knowledge we hold on to. When you lose those people, you don't just lose the functionality. You learn the knowledge and the experience of how the business needs to work. So. That is a huge risk at the moment.
Definitely, and like you say, it's an integral part of the business, isn't it? Payroll. It can collapse and impact so many different things. So, like you say, if you have got people moving and taking their knowledge with them, or the talent needs time to train up, is the question: how do you bridge that gap? Yeah,
exactly. If you've got a very manual-driven process, or that's driven on people's experience, as soon as that person's experience leaves, you can't just replicate that. Suddenly, you're bound by manual processes that are not allowing you to keep compliant. So, and this is a quote that was shared with us by Camilla King, our principal product manager at MHR. There is a big knowledge gap in some organisations that leave them vulnerable to fines for not meeting legislative compliance.
That is a good point.
If those people go who understand that and no one else does, how are you going to keep on top of compliance? So as a result, remaining compliant continues to be a challenge in payroll departments. And since the Great Resignation, a lot of departments have been struggling with talent gaps. This is especially pronounced in payroll teams. Right? They are so reliant on knowledge, as we've just discussed, in regard to processes or compliance, that skills gaps aren't just problematic, they can be crippling to organisation. Right? So finding ways to overcome that is a major trend for 2024.
Okay.
How do you get past the experience barrier or that siloed knowledge which lives and dies with that employee working with you at that time?
Interesting. So I wondered, with that kind of, I guess, that knowledge gap or the skills gap that we're talking about, how can technology then be integrated into the payroll processes or into the payroll team to kind of help bridge that gap?
Well, I think a lot of it's almost about automating processes. So you're not, because
That's
sometimes,
true,
right,
yeah.
when you work for an organisation for so long, and you might have worked there since before you've brought in automation or any kind of digital process, where it's been a manual process, and a lot of payroll departments start as a manual process, right? Where because you don't understand how the business works, and so you don't understand the process you need.
Yeah.
When you have someone who's so used to doing those processes, you become reliant on that person because they're the only one who knows what actions you have to take, or when you take it, or what process they've built for themselves.
Yeah.
So if you can actually use payroll software or HR software to automate processes, not only are you making that experienced person more empowered because you're not labouring them down with all these repetitive tasks they have to do every month or every week.
That is a good point. Yeah.
You're freeing up their expertise to look at a bigger picture. So that's where I think a comprehensive payroll service or software is allowing you to free up that expertise. And also, you don't silo yourself into that person's experience. You get that person to build your process, so a machine or a digital process can take it on for you and free up your time and your money.
Yeah, and I can imagine for people across the business, not just the payroll, or like say the payroll manager, it makes it seamless. If you're integrating your system with what would be quite a manual task, it should be seamless and maybe avoiding quite a few risks with, I can imagine payroll, you might have a few mistakes if it is manual and it's still kept on pen and paper, or you're still waiting for, I can imagine, timesheets maybe are submitted. Yeah. So maybe the idea of not just can a system help support that gap knowledge and take a workload, but it's mitigating some risks that come with payroll.
Yeah, well, I remember I've worked for so many companies in the past, maybe like small SMEs especially, where the payroll or the finance was just done by one person. And I remember thinking, they would run our payroll. They'd be, the last Wednesday of the month, you can't get hold of me. I'm working, but I've got to do all the pay runs, and I'm like, and that's all on you. And they're like, yeah, I do it every month. I'm like, what happens if you get hit by a bus? Are we not going to get paid? Like, who no one else knows how to do this. Yeah. So there is a silo of that knowledge there, and I think automation of those processes allows the business to not worry about these things getting done.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So on that note as well, one of the other major risks that has been highlighted in our report to payroll is the need to modernise.
Right.
So research has shown that payroll departments struggle to modernise because they're, again, as we've kind of already discussed, right, they're often seen as purely administrative and bookkeeping roles, right? Payroll teams don't often get the tech investment or other departments that the other departments kind of see, because they're like, you just do that. And I'm like, no, you don't understand the importance of it. Yeah. So that makes those skills gap even bigger. Because again, you're not investing in the processes. You've just got people who are isolating them, and they're doing it their own way. If the rest of the business doesn't understand what needs to be done, you're at the whim of their availability. Yeah. So technology can smooth over these missing gaps. That's what our report says. So they're the main issues that we predicted are going to be a problem. It's the ability to modernise, it's the ability to automate, and it's the need to retain talent, or at least utilise that talent in the right way, so you're not stuck if it isn't available. Right,
okay. They're all interesting thoughts, aren't they, really? Yeah. I know that, speaking of payroll, those seem quite challenges that are, I guess, are kind of kept within the business operations, isn't it, of that payroll? Are people being paid? How they're being paid? And if they're not having that investment and modernising, it's really sticking them into, again, that same routine, isn't it? It's really repetitive. Yeah. So maybe it is something the company should be looking at and thinking, what can we do to make our payroll more streamlined, easier transition, and that sort of thing. Something else I picked up, which I thought was really interesting in the guide, and we did mention it a little bit last year, but it's about real time.
Yeah.
So real time is key is a phrase that they've used in our guide.
And that's what our guide positions itself as, saying, actually the solution to these risks are that real-time payroll is what you need, or a flexible payroll solution which is reflective of the way that people work now. Because like you say, if payroll is seen as an old process that's jumbling along in the background, because it always has, but actually your workforce is changing how it works, or the hours that you spend working, or if the industry is changing how people are working, you need an adaptive payroll solution which factors in for how people's hours are rewarded back to them. So like, and that's kind of what we talk about. If you can look in the guide now, it's really interesting, and it's not just us talking about this. There's lots of other organisations talking about the benefits of real-time or live payroll. So what is it?
Right? What is it indeed?
So, no matter, and this is what a report says, no matter what problems a payroll team might be facing, real-time payroll is the key to those solutions, right? It's proven to be a massive success for organisations that have implemented it, overcoming a lot of problems that have plagued lots of payroll departments for years, whilst also unlocking new ways for handling new requirements. So real-time payroll is the ability for people not to rely on a monthly pay run, on a weekly pay run to get a pay slip and see what they've earned after they've done so. Real-time payroll is the ability to use digital functionality and software so you can get a true live sight of the money you've earned as you've earned it. Right, so you can be okay. So I'm a shift worker, or so I'm working in retail, right? And I can choose the hours that I work, or I can switch it up each week. It might be that I'm working more hours one week than I am the other, so I can't just take my pay slip that's going to be standard every month or every week. What I can do is make more financial well-being decisions based on what I need.
Interesting.
Based on being able to look and go, okay, I'm going to go on a platform like, say, our platform, People First. I can log in and go, this is how many hours I've worked this week. As a result, my pay slip, live as it is right now, is telling me that I've earned this much. So I can now make decisions in my interest about how much more I want to work, or how my tax or any other benefits that I'm kind of contributing towards my pay packet are being affected about the shifts or the decisions I'm making as an employee. Equally, my manager can also make decisions about how they can better support me based on that live site of my pay and contribution that month.
You picked up on a good point, actually, when you're talking about those, looking at that time period, and for the worker, what do they need to do more, or for someone that's on a salary base, you can look at and say, right, what is my salary looking at? Is there any I'm trying to think, the expenses that you might need to pop in. I know that from our software, People First, I go in and I can see it immediately. As soon as I've submitted and it's approved, it's there. So you talked about automation, and I think that just really showcases where payroll can take if you're looking at automation. But you do speak about the peaks and the peak periods, I guess it is, where you could be making those decisions. And in the guide, we kind of refer to the peaks and troughs of the payroll period. So it probably, something like real time does help address that challenge. And I know that that's definitely a challenge that it happens every single month. Yeah,
absolutely. So if you know these problems are coming, these actions are coming, why wouldn't you automate that process? And actually, if you build in a software which does it for you, you can see it live. You don't have to wait. Why are you waiting until the end of the month to get this data? This data's live. It's happening. We may as well log it. We may as well get a better site. We might be able to predict this stuff and make better business decisions. So the guy goes on to say that, real-time payroll is the automatic process where payroll calculations are made as soon as changes are made to data, right? It's all about data. And you can see how changes are impacting in your payroll straight away. That removes a huge number of issues, as we've just discussed, right? Payroll has historically been a process with a lot of stressful peaks and troughs, as you've just mentioned. Things get locked into place and then errors crop up and often not spotted until it's too late because we've already done the pay run. So actually, you can get ahead of manual errors with this by using real-time payroll and using digital transformation to automate these processes.
Interesting.
So real-time payroll removes those concerns, right? Not only does this streamline processes, but it also means that it makes it easier to spot errors, increase the accuracy, and improves visibility without adding to your payroll team's workload because it's automated. You're not making more work for people. In fact, you're taking work off their hands and giving them more sight of your people data.
Yeah, and that probably leads to the question of, so if they've taken that manual process off the hands of the people in the team, where can their time now be capitalised? Where can they now be adding value? And that's, I think, a massive question that companies can think about for their own staff. Where is the value in the activities that they're doing?
Also, because you've digitalised this process, you're creating data that you didn't have before. And now you have experienced minds of the business with a lot of experience of how things work, being able to analyse that data and actually make decisions that are going to impact the business in a positive way. how can I look at what we've done every month? Or how can I look at the data that's coming in weekly about these pay runs? And how can I go, you know what, we could save a lot of money doing this. Or actually, I can see trends in how people are working. That means we can increase efficiencies in a different place in the business.
It's all very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's about data. It's about providing the sight of that so you can use it. Because otherwise, if it's all manual, it's all guesswork, isn't it?
Oh, completely.
And you're remaking the wheel every month, and I'm like, it just seems laborious. So that's what real-time payroll can do, and that's how it proposes it can get past the risks that we've talked about before. So again, if you're automating it and you're seeing it live, you are removing the need for that experience to stay in the business, or you're utilizing that experience in a much more effective way. So the guide then goes on to make a few other suggestions about how payroll can be utilized, or areas of payroll can add better value, create more value to a business. And actually, one of the main benefits for real-time payroll, as well as other areas that you can look at payroll, is making sure that your employees have more access to tools to support their financial well-being. Because, and we talked about this at the start of the month, right?
I was just about to say that. We've definitely already spoke about this in the previous podcast, but financial well-being, it's still going to rumble on. I think we've got the cost of living crisis. Again, it's keywords that are mentioned over and over again. It's always on the news. But it is something that it should be important. It should be important to you, to your employer, and to everyone, really. Because at the end of the day, it can have not just impact on yourself, but on your work, on your outside of work, probably partners, family, friends, you name it. So I think it's an important matter. But you've got here that flexible pay means better financial well-being. And I think that's an interesting one to kind of put as a bold statement, because simply put, it should be that. It should be that if you've got flexible pay, and we mean flexible pay in the version of that we're looking at the idea that you have visibility of your pay. So that kind of that real-time aspect that we spoke about. But in the world of work, more flexible payroll needs to be modernised and adopted, which is then more suitable to your organisation or to your employees.
So, and like you just said, like new approaches to working hours and new ways of working. So, you got more legislation changes in like gig workers or freelancers or temp hires, right? If this is coming in and this is increasing, right, you've got increased compliance issues then, because you've got all these different scenarios that your payroll team now has to manage and figure out. If you automate that, or you've got it aligned in a process, actually you're removing the complexity behind your payroll, but also you're creating more opportunities for people to take control of their own decision making when they're doing shifts or gig work or contract work for you, right?
And that's an idea I quite like, actually, that they can take control of their own financial situation. Because at the end of the day, when you're in control, you are making your own decisions. You're not being driven by an outside aspect. So if you are making your own decisions, it's very much looking at, right, if you're planning ahead, you've got the data and it's true data. And I think that's what's most important. But a stat here that I've just picked up on from your notes is that employees are 5 times more likely to take time off due to financial stress. So it brings into question, I guess, the idea of, okay, if we're talking about real-time pay, we're talking about people that have more flexible jobs in the hours that they work. If they're not having that financial stress because they have the visibility of what they're earning that month, and again, we're talking about better communication with their managers, hopefully we're reducing that number and we're not having people go through that financial stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And also look at the kind of business functionality point. Like all the queries that you might go to your payroll team are probably to do with your pay slip at the end of the month.
It probably is, yeah.
But if you've got live sight of your data throughout the month and as you're earning, you're probably going to reduce the queries coming into a payroll team who can focus on the things that they really need to be working on in the business.
Yes. Exactly.
So financial well-being has become a more significant concern for employees more than ever, with close to 7% of employees are distracted or unengaged with work due to the financial stress.
Right.
So as you said, 5 times people are more likely to need to take time off because of and take sick days because of stress.
Right.
So financial well-being can take many forms. It doesn't have to be a huge shift in the organisation. It could be just making sure that they have access to kind of like, financial advisors and stuff. It doesn't have to be a payroll-heavy thing, but I think we can see the adoption of real-time payroll really support the control and sight of your people's finances so they can feel more empowered in control of what they can do. Empowered. So that's it. And I think there's a lot more that the guide will go into. But I think in the nutshell, that was the deep dive I wanted to do this week, is looking at, this is the challenges that payroll faces, and they're age-old challenges, aren't they?
Yeah.
Lack of resource, lack of expertise in the team that you can retain, and too many processes, and it's too complex. Well, actually, and this is what we talk about lots at MHR, if your payroll service or software can make it a lot less complex, can make sure that your experienced talent are doing the right thing, and you're unburdening the hours of your payroll team to do more interesting things, then suddenly you're a lot better off. You're spending less money on manual errors or fines because you're not compliant, and actually you're automating something to make your life easier, a lot clearer, and you're making sure you're future-proofing your knowledge and your processes for all your staff to come. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see if our predictions are right for 2024, if these are the challenges. And I can imagine, like you say, they are historic challenges. We all know them. But what will change in 2024?
Well, maybe if we get to the end of the year and we realise that none of these challenges are a problem for organisations anymore, it's because we've done our job.
There we go.
There we go. So if these challenges aren't a thing at the end of the year, we were right and we solved it. You're welcome. Brilliant. So next week we will do the same. We are going to look into our predictions guide and we're going to go into a deep dive into HR. And then we'll do finance, and then we'll do learning, and then we'll do all of these other things so we can see what's going on in the world of work. But that's payroll. That's your lot. Hope you agree with it. Send your thoughts. Give us your comments.
I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah. And have a look at what we do at MHR. We can help.
Lovely. Well, it's been Andy and I on the MHR podcast. Hope you have a lovely rest of the day.
We'll see you next week.